Have you ever just sat on a plane, looked out the window, and really thought about the fact that you're flying? I mean, it's something we totally take for granted now, but for pretty much all of human history, it was just an impossible dream. So that's what we're going to do in this explainer. We're going to trace that incredible journey, from a simple wish to the unbelievably complex and safe system that lets millions of us just soar through the sky every single day.
Okay, let's just dive right in with these two images, because they tell a huge part of the story. On the left, you've got Leonardo da Vinci's dream from the 1500s. It's an ornithopter, and it's designed to flap like a bird. It's beautiful, right? But it never, ever would have worked. And on the right, you have the Wright brothers flyer from 1903. That's a 400-year gap between a brilliant fantasy and a reality that changed the world. So how did we get from one to the other? That's what we're here to figure out.
You know, for thousands of years, the problem wasn't about flying faster or higher. It was just about getting off the ground. Period. And for the longest time, we were all looking in the totally wrong place for the answer. The most obvious idea was, well, let's just copy the creatures that have already mastered it. Birds.
Yeah, it sounds logical, right? I mean, humans are way bigger and stronger than birds, so why couldn't we just strap on some wings and flap our way up there? But here's the thing. That logic is totally, fundamentally wrong. A physicist named Robert Hooke figured this out way back in 1655. It's not about raw strength. Birds have these incredibly specialized muscles and hearts and lungs, all built specifically for flight. We just don't. It was time for a whole new approach.
So how do you solve a problem that big? Well, you don't do it all at once. It happened piece by piece. First, we had to get over that whole bird copying idea. Then, boom, a massive breakthrough in 1783. The Montgolfier brothers use a hot air balloon to crack the code on lift. But, balloons just go where the wind takes them. The key to control actually came from a kid's toy, the kite. Sir George Cayley studied them and figured out the basics of aerodynamics. And then finally, the Wright brothers put the whole puzzle together: lift, control, and a lightweight engine for power.
And this picture, it's so much more than just a snapshot of some old machine. This single image represents 4 years of hardcore scientific experimentation. The Wright brothers weren't just tinkerers in a bike shop. They were serious scientists. They built their own wind tunnel, they tested hundreds of different wing designs, they obsessed over every little detail. So when this thing lifted off the ground for just 12 seconds, it wasn't just a flight. It was the moment the dream finally, officially became reality.
All right, so we've done it. The airplane exists. But that just opened up a whole new can of worms. What do you actually do with it? Is it just an expensive, super dangerous toy for rich daredevils? Or could this thing actually become a real business?
Really think about it for a second. In those first years, there were no rules, no safety checks, no air traffic control, nothing. Getting into one of these early planes was a huge, huge leap of faith. So the big question was, who would be brave enough, or maybe just crazy enough, to try and turn this daredevil hobby into a scheduled business for regular folks?
Well, believe it or not, the answer came from Florida, the St. Petersburg-Tampa airboat line. This was it, America's very first scheduled airline. Its route was just 21 miles across the bay, turning a long boat ride into a quick 23-minute flight. Now, the airline itself only lasted for 4 months, but in that short time, it safely flew more than 1,200 passengers. It was a tiny experiment, but it proved a massive point. Commercial flight could actually work.
And you're not going to believe this. To decide who would be the very first paying customer in history, they held an auction right there on the dock. The winning bid was an insane $400. That's over $10,000 today. The winner was A.C. Fail, the former mayor of St. Petersburg, who literally paid his way into the history books.
Okay, so the Florida airline was cool, a great proof of concept, but it wasn't going to last. The real game changer, the thing that truly turned aviation into a serious industry, was something way more practical: the mail. Starting in 1918, the U.S. Airmail Service started flying routes all over the country. See, mail doesn't get scared, and it always needs to get somewhere fast. This is what proved that the airplane had serious, scalable, commercial value.
And this right here was the workhorse of that era, the de Havilland DH-4 mail plane. What's so wild is that the U.S. Army was a huge part of this at the beginning. They used these mail routes as the ultimate training ground for their pilots, teaching them how to fly cross-country. So without even really meaning to, they were building the first generation of professional pilots who would go on to create the entire commercial airline industry.
So now you've got more and more planes up there, carrying mail and a few very brave passengers. And that created a brand new critical problem. With everyone just flying wherever and whenever they wanted, how do you stop it from being total chaos? The sky was basically the Wild West.
You had this huge problem, right? A total free-for-all. Anybody could build a plane in their barn, call themselves a pilot, and just take off. It was dangerous and completely unsustainable. And then you have the solution. The industry itself knew this was nuts, so leaders actually pushed the government to step in. And the result was the Air Commerce Act of 1926. This was the moment the grown-ups finally entered the room to bring some order to the skies.
And look at this. It might just look like an old piece of paper, but this document, this is everything. This represents a monumental shift. This is the government saying, for the very first time, okay, we've checked this person out. They know what they're doing, and we've checked their plane. It's safe to fly. This was the absolute foundation for building the public trust the industry desperately needed.
Of course, that 1926 Act was just the starting line. As the industry got bigger and more complex, the oversight had to evolve too. In 1938, you get the CAA. Then, once the superfast jets show up in the 50s, you need an even more powerful agency. That's when the Federal Aviation Agency, the FAA, is born. You see how it just keeps building on itself, right? All the way up to the Federal Aviation Administration we know today.
Okay, let's fast forward to today. We've got incredibly fast jets, millions of people flying, and some of the most crowded skies on Earth. You can't just wing it anymore. This whole thing requires an unbelievably sophisticated set of rules, a whole architecture of information to keep it all running safely. And you've probably wondered about this, right? With so much going on, how does a pilot know everything they need to know? How do they hear about a last-minute runway closure, or a pop-up military exercise, or even something as random as a flock of birds right in their flight path? They can't exactly pull over and check Google Maps, right?
Well, the answer is this really clever, standardized system of information. You can think of it like a three-legged stool that keeps everything stable. First, you've got the actual law, the Code of Federal Regulations. Then you have the AIM, the Aeronautical Information Manual. That's basically the official how-to guide. And finally, for the stuff that's happening right now, you have something called NOTAMs. These are the real-time safety alerts.
So let's talk about that last one, NOTAMs. What the heck is a NOTAM? The acronym stands for Notice to Airmen, but really just think of it as an urgent official heads-up for pilots. It's all about time-critical information. In plain English, it's the system that makes sure every pilot has the absolute latest info they need for a safe flight, right this second.
And we're talking about anything that could possibly be a problem. A runway's closed down, a key piece of navigation gear is on the fritz, there's a big air show or a bunch of skydivers in the area, or even a temporary hazard like a giant construction crane or a huge flock of birds. It's a dynamic system for a very dynamic world.
And you got to remember, this whole complex system isn't run by algorithms or robots. It's managed by thousands and thousands of dedicated people. What you're looking at here is a Flight Standards District Office, a FSDO. There are about 80 of these around the country, and they are filled with FAA inspectors and staff who are out there every day making sure everyone from pilots to airlines is playing by the rules. So when you step back and you connect all the dots, you see this incredible story. We went from Da Vinci dreaming of bird wings to a global system built on law, procedure, and real-time data. It's this massive, invisible architecture of safety that has turned a dangerous adventure into the safest form of transportation in human history.
So here's what I want you to do. The next time you're on a plane and you're looking out that window, I hope you see more than just the clouds. Think about that hidden world, the rule books, the inspectors, the air traffic controllers, that constant stream of data, all working together perfectly to keep you safe. The system is huge and complex, but it's not totally invisible, not if you know where to look. So the question is, what part of it are you going to see?